Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Souter. Ethan Prolib could not be here with us tonight. He has a job, got his real estate license. He's getting a real paycheck. I told him we would double his paycheck. He mumbled something about what happens when you double zero. I don't know. He wasn't able to make it. Real work. We miss him. I think he's misguided, but wouldn't be the first time. Thank you very much for joining us. A lot is going on. So we let's when isn't there something going on? I that probably goes without saying. If nothing was going on, there wouldn't be a show. We have a number of shows scheduled. I have, as you recall, I had a tooth issue and they weren't able to fix it. It requires actually a surgeon, so they just couldn't fix it then and there. It's planned, but we've had to move some shows around. There is no schedule. The area there is just gray for now, but we do have several shows with Ozzy coming up. We've got a show with so Ozzy's going to be Landon Knoll. His regular series is coming up. His next topic is the Supreme Court in the United States, its rights, roles, and responsibilities. We are going to be discussing two different topics with Ozzy. We're going to be continuing on philosophy. We are going to be discussing Hume's problem of induction, which is a serious, serious problem as to how one can rationally justify the beliefs that one holds. It's an interesting topic, especially if you're interested in philosophy. It's a pain in the ass topic if you're interested in basically any other subject. Uh, we are also going to have, I think, something on top. Well, I'll hold off on that one. Where there's just people have said they want a little more controversy on In Time. We're going to go from 0 to 100 on that one. It's not deliberate, but we'll discuss that one when that's a little more carefully worded. We're also going to have on Sokka. For those of you in certain communities know Sokka as long-standing, actually genuinely a friend of mine. I'm gonna go out. He doesn't like it when I admit that, and I do understand why. He's got a valid point, but he's going to come on, and we're going to discuss a couple different political issues, including the history of sort of political terms and our understanding of conservatism versus liberalism and what those terms have meant in the past, what they mean now, and also the moral implications of how one interacts with one's government and the rule of government and who is in the power in a relationship between government and how that's determined. That's going to be a marvelous discussion. I've been on a number of streams with him. We actually have had that discussion before, so I think that's going to be a good one to do on In Time. So thank you all for joining us. The Senate today unveiled a $1 trillion stimulus package. This is on top of the previous stimulus packages totaling, I believe there was if I recall, I don't remember if the other one trillion one was passed, so I think this would be 3 trillion total, which is a staggering amount of money even for the U.S. budget. We've had some discussions on our understanding of that. I appreciate the idea that money needs to be spent, and I believe that's correct. I think throwing money at it isn't particularly helpful, and I think, in fact, that's going to increase the problem. We're looking at what's happening with the stock market right now. The stock market, I think, probably is overinflated as a result of all these stimulus packages. You pump $2 trillion into the economy, you're going to see a rise in the stock market. Actually, you haven't seen much of a rise because COVID numbers, I think, would normally be taking it down. You're going to see a rubber band effect once we run out of money to throw into the problem. So we're going to discuss that. We're getting a panel of experts together to discuss that and sort of reach some conclusions. But this proposal from the Senate today would cut $400 per person from the enhanced unemployment benefits, reducing it from $600 to $200 per person. It's designed to put much of those benefits and burdens back onto the states. So this is not to say that people are going to suddenly lose all their unemployment benefits. Depends on your state. But the federal government is getting themselves out of that business. Right now, the states, it's to transition to a state system that presumably would would reimburse workers for roughly 70% of their wages so long as they're laid off. Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas has said that he anticipates, quote, significant resistance from Republicans to this stimulus package. Quote, there is significant resistance due to yet another $1 trillion. The answer to these challenges will not simply be shoveling cash out of Washington. The answer to these challenges will be getting people back to work. And as it stands now, I think it's likely you'll see a number of Republicans in opposition to this bill and expressing serious concerns. Now, while the Republicans may be a majority, they still will be unable to pass this at this point. There'll be enough resistance, they will be unable to pass it without Democratic support. Mitch McConnell has stated that he is aware that this is, quote, a starting place, and that he will need Democrats to actually get this bill passed. Quote, every bill has to start somewhere. Republicans are in the majority in the Senate. This is a starting place, and you'll have plenty of stories to cover along the way as we have back and forth discussions along party lines and with this administration. As we reported through video shown from multiple angles, both inside the park and from the perspective of the police officers before, during, and after the event, the violent clearing of protesters at Lafayette Square last month to make room for a photo opportunity for Donald Trump was done without any provocation whatsoever from the protesters. Make no mistake, this was a president who wanted a photo op and ordered peaceful protesters who were not engaged in violence and who, in fact, could legally be there since it was a public park, ordered them cleared violently so he could take a photo op. He then covered it up by saying that they had engaged in violence. We showed photo of an Australian news crew that was forcibly removed, and I laughed because of a private joke thanks to a kangaroo in somebody's Discord on that one, so I'll try to keep my composure there. Thank you for people who subvert the news with inappropriate imagery. They were violently removed. The camera crew was assaulted. The camera received a fist to the face. You can see it just as the officer goes like that. It's we've seen when the officers moved in, we've seen it from the perspective of the officers, from cameras that were behind the officers when they received the order, which was based not on violence, but on a timed assault. We've seen the footage from inside the park where nobody had engaged any of the officers. In fact, they were ignoring the officers when they started moving. And all of the violence precipitated at that point was done exclusively by the officers clearing the square. Tomorrow, National Guard General Major, Adam DeMarco will testify before Congress. He is expected to state that, in fact, there was no prior warning to the protesters that the protesters had not been violent, and that it was his understanding that they were being cleared explicitly because the president was showing up and wanted a photo opportunity. This is the highest ranking military official who was present and receiving orders at the time to weigh in on what happened, and his view matches the photographic evidence, the video evidence, the evidence and testimony of all of the protesters there, and of, I want to say, a bishop at the church at which this was taken who claimed that nothing was happening. They were resting, recovering from previous protesters, and from as I recall, a warm day, she was passing out water. So this is concordant with all of the evidence we have, except for one, the testimony of Donald Trump himself, who says that they had been violent and needed to be cleared, and of his, I think it was his interim press secretary, who said that that's what happened. General Adam DeMarco is expected to invoke the Military Whistleblower Protection Act, which will prevent anybody, including the President of the United States, from blocking his testimony before Congress. Trump, who has to date successfully blocked a great deal of congressional testimony looking into his activities, defied congressional subpoenas, and almost certainly broken the law in so doing. In this case, it looks like he will be unable to stop it. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien has tested positive for COVID-19. This is the highest ranking member of Trump's administration to test positive. He's currently working from home and says he continues to work. His symptoms appear at this point to be mild. It is and remains unclear when was the last time he was in the vicinity of the President of the United States, but his last public appearance with the President was about 2 weeks ago in Miami on June 10th when they were visiting the U.S. Southern Command. Major League Baseball has canceled its 2 games tonight. The Miami Marlins was one of the teams scheduled to go tonight, and they have said now that they will cancel their entire season. The Marlins are now suffering 2 coaches who have tested positive for COVID-19 and 11 players who have tested positive. 2 games are still scheduled for tomorrow and presumably at this point will continue. There are 65 new cases of COVID-19 in Middletown, New Jersey, 52 of which are from people in the ages of 15 and 19. This is one of the demographics which tend to get it slightly less than others, not by nearly as much as reported, and not necessarily for the reasons reported, and not as much as, say, sort of those in the age of 9, around 9-year-old, which the data is hazy, but right now still seems to suggest do seem to get it somewhat less frequently. When they get it, it does appear to be statistically less mild, but some of them just simply die. 9-year-old gets it, dead 2 days later. It happens. So, and I say that for just certain, in case any random cabinet members of Donald Trump's administration, say education cabinet level, Secretary of Education perhaps, who might be listening and who says that children are stoppers of COVID-19. They're not. Nonetheless, last week, it appears now that most of those are from kids who attended one party. We are now having a significant increase, a noticeable increase in COVID cases from people who have attended so-called COVID parties. About a week and a half ago, we reported on a kid who had attended a COVID party because he thought COVID was either fake or at least overblown. He got COVID, went into the hospital. His last words were, quote, "I thought it was a hoax." At least 35 new cases have been reported on Long Beach Island, New Jersey, from a gathering of lifeguards. Those 35 cases are, in fact, all lifeguards. And individuals at Atlas Gym in New Jersey were arrested today. Actually, I shouldn't say individuals. It was actually the owners were arrested when they failed to close their facility pursuant to a state order, followed by a judge's ruling that the state's order was, in fact, valid. They were arrested and released and told that they cannot run their gym. A number of institutions in New Jersey, Florida, Texas, New York have all been running in violation of social distancing orders. Governor of Florida had said that they thought that just the threat of losing their liquor license would be sufficient to stop it. As some people know, I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, most businesses in New York get most of their money from their liquor license. Actually, restaurants in New York get most of their money from sales of alcohol. 80% of their income comes from alcohol sales. Almost no business which has a liquor license in New York can function if that liquor license is removed. They have to close down. They can't afford the cost. They make their money off the liquor. In New York, apparently in Florida, either the threat was insufficient or nobody believed it. Florida is as yet not actively moving towards violators. In New Jersey, they are beginning to. In New York, New York has begun issuing citations against businesses which violate these policies and have suspended more than 40 liquor licenses in the last 2.5 days. They've issued another, on top of that, 50 citations. In Florida, the teachers union is suing Governor Ron DeSantis and saying that um, the state cannot open up schools since there is a clear and present danger both to the students and to the teachers. The Kaiser Family Foundation study released, I think, 3 days ago. We covered that one as well in our last episode, I believe, found that 35%, as much as 35% of teachers are high risk due for a number of factors, but not the least of which is age. Teachers do tend to have a higher age than most other professions. In fact, many people might retire from one profession and go into teaching. Because teachers average a higher age than you might find in other jobs, this makes them far more prone to severe complications from COVID-19 and more likely to die as a result. So when we have people in this administration saying it's time to reopen the schools, kids are resilient, everything will be fine, they are also ignoring DeSantis, not DeSantos. Thank you for the correction. You're endangering a great deal more people than the kids. You're also endangering the teachers. You are endangering the parents of those kids when those kids come home sick, and you are and by the way, this is essentially what Norway tried. So Norway did a full lockdown with one exception, which was they did not close the schools. Now, their COVID numbers were better than most other countries. They were better than the U.S. They were better certainly than Italy, Germany, France. They've done better. They left their schools open. So this was seen as evidence that leaving the schools open would work. The problem is, A, they locked down absolutely everything else, something the United States has refused under any and all circumstances to do, probably because it's the reasonable thing. Freedom, apparently. I'm told. That aside, and that notwithstanding, the other Scandinavian countries also closed the schools and had significantly better numbers than Norway. Yes, Norway did better than most other countries, but the other Scandinavian countries that followed the same protocol but also closed the schools did even better than them. You close the schools. Texas has now surpassed 5,000 deaths from coronavirus. This is where it gets a little scary. 1,000 of those 5,000 deaths are from the last 6 days alone. More than a 50% increase from the prior 1,000, which was in, 10 days before that, and another 50% increase from the 1,000 before that. Another 5,000 deaths in less than a week out of 5,000 total. This is what we've been expecting, which is that, again, there is a lag not only between when an action is taken and the effect of that action on coronavirus. There's a lag, a 2-week lag, because people can carry the virus and be infected without even knowing it and not express symptoms for up to, usually on average, no more than 2 weeks, but in some cases it can go to 3 weeks or even longer in extraordinarily rare cases. I forget the longest case out. But at any rate, on average, you're going to see about 2 weeks between when, say, the entire country shuts down and seeing any noticeable effect from that shutdown. If the country completely reopens, the COVID numbers are going to keep going down for 2 weeks until that lag period expires, and then it's going to start going up as a result of the opening. But the deaths come another 2 weeks after that, and the reason is because just because someone starts getting sick, they don't die right away. Someone can get sick, and then they get sicker, end up in the hospital. People are now starting to die faster. There's a couple of reasons for that, and we'll get into it. But on average, you can say the deaths, just for ease, we're saying another 2 weeks on the deaths. So what we are seeing now is the 2-week lag on the major increase of cases. So once again, if we close the entire country down, all the cases will continue to head up, proportionate to actions that we had taken exactly 2 weeks ago from today. So in 2 weeks, if we shut the entire country down, we'll start to see the effects of that closure. But then the deaths will be another 2 weeks from that period. So we are starting to see the spike in deaths that we were anticipating as a result of the openings and the significant increase in COVID cases that we started seeing roughly 2 weeks ago when we started reporting this again in earnest because of those changes. 5,000 deaths in Texas total, and 1,000 of those in the last 6 days. Their hospitals are irrefutably getting overwhelmed, and that's also contributing to the increase of deaths and will unfortunately probably go higher. Also, public health officials at this point are stating that they believe that the real numbers are higher. The reason for this is because they're not testing all of the dead people. A couple of reasons for that, not the least of which is they would like to save on testing, and also people are dying too fast to test them all. We have a number of cases also where EMTs are being asked simply to shuttle bodies out of the hospital morgues, sometimes dozens a day out of the hospital morgues and into refrigerated coolers. They go to a funeral home, and literally they can't bring them into the home. There is a refrigerated truck in the back, and they are depositing all the bodies there. They don't have time to test them all. If they did, at this point, the general consensus is the numbers would be over 5,000. So, the increase in new cases in Texas does appear to be slowing down. This is good news. It is the first sign of good news. There's also some evidence that perhaps the incidence of new cases across the U.S. is for the first time since this second wave. It's actually really just a continuing of the first wave, but certainly this spike in the first wave. There's some evidence it may be slowing down. This is spectacular news. Please keep in mind. What that means is the rate of new cases is slowing down. We're still getting that high spike in new cases every single day. We're just not seeing the number of new cases continuing to go up. But we're still getting those new cases. So I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I'm trying to point out that while it's delightful to think that maybe the U.S. is starting to have some efficacy, not in controlling this, because controlling this would be down well below where our numbers are, but at least stopping the staggering increase at which these cases are the staggering rise at which these cases are increasing. Again, 1,000 dead in 6 days in Texas. If they can keep that number from increasing, then every 6 days in Texas, 1,000 people are going to die. Every 6 days. That's what happens if they keep the number from going up. Again, we're not talking the death number. The death numbers are going to continue to go up across the country. We are talking about new infection rates, and the rates seem to be plateauing, at least for now. We get a lot of plateaus, and then skyrockets again. Nobody knows. But it's a good sign. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, we want those cases to start going down. But nothing. The U.S. has gone insane. We have more cases. We have 4% of the world's population, 30% of the COVID deaths in this country. I'd like to see the numbers go down. I kind of thought that the U.S. could do better than that. And now I know for a fact I'm wrong. If we can't come together for this and fix this problem, we can't come together for anything. Governor Greg Abbott issued a mandate 3 weeks ago stating that masks would have to be worn. I just believe that this is at least one of the things that is leading to at least the reduction in the increase of COVID cases. However, he has also commented on his, or at least it's been reported, that he is extraordinarily displeased at the fact that ICU information has been made available to the public during this crisis, and the state of Texas is no longer making available public information about the status of their ICU units and their overflow and max capacity. Last we reported on it, this state, which had a maximum waiting time of 30 minutes for an ambulance that had a patient that it was delivering to the ER, and has now been hitting around 10-hour waits for an ambulance that has a dying patient in the back trying to get into the ER. 10 hours. He is now banned that data from being released, so we are unable to report to you what the status of their ICU units and hospitals are. What we can report is last time we spoke, a number of counties were overwhelmed and they were shutting down all incoming to new cases, and they were taking them either by helicopter or by car to nearby states. Some of those states are also starting to have issues, but at this point we will be unable to continue unless we get another source of information. We're not going to be able to continue. We do know that at present, Governor Abbott is not resisting, but refuses to comment on demands from the medical community that he issue a full shutdown, with his state having an infection rate 10 times higher than it was just 2 months ago. Since the CDC is also no longer allowed to collect this data, and the White House is taking all of the data that I can imagine only for political purposes. That's the only thing that the White House can do with the data that the CDC can't. The CDC is the only organization in this country that's capable of handling the amount of data that's coming in on these states. It's explicitly what the CDC is designed to do. The White House, since they've taken control of this data I think it's a little more than 14 days ago, hasn't released 1 hour's worth of COVID data, where the CDC was regularly updating every hour their compilation of all of the COVID data. We no longer have access to any official records. Johns Hopkins University does have their own dashboard. On In Time, we have pinned the dashboard information to the updates section of our Discord. We also have other people on In Time who are familiar with that and who know how to get that data. We will also drop a link to that in a little bit, but as of this moment, it's Johns Hopkins University. There is one international organization which appears to be covering it. We have their link too. Other than that, it's guesswork because the president and a number of states now refuse to share the data. Because the situation is still expected to get worse, I think at this point Texas can still at least expect a dramatic increase in deaths. Hopefully the increased numbers are going to start to decline. I am going to interrupt for one moment because there was a story that I did want to cover at the top of the hour or at the top of this, and I appear to have failed. I do apologize. So I'm going to go back 1 second. On Saturday, there was a shooting in Austin, Texas. How this shooting happened has nobody's concurred yet on what precisely caused or how this shooting happened, and I believe for some reason here this has not shown up in the window, so I will see if I can get this up, and it does not want to. There we are. Okay, that looks terrible, quite frankly, but it works. So let's see. Yes, and somebody pointed out, and I appreciate this, we're also going to have further problems because we're going to be entering flu season soon. Flu season will add to deaths in general. Now, again, flu season wouldn't account for COVID deaths except for one set of circumstances. If the hospitals are overwhelmed, and if somebody has to go to the hospital because of the flu, and there are no hospital beds because of COVID, and that person dies because they were incapable of getting sufficient treatment, that's a COVID death. It's a secondary death. They didn't die because of COVID. They died from the flu. But if the argument can be made that that flu could have, under any other set of circumstances, been treated, and they probably would have survived, then the reason they died is because we have a medical system that is incapable of dealing with just basic everyday ailments, including the example I always use, which is dialysis. If you need dialysis in certain counties in Texas and you have to go to a hospital to get it done, it's not happening. It's just not happening. That's a fact. There's no discussion on that right now. So if you can't travel to another county or to another state to get it done, or if that other state is not allowing people to come in because of, and right now we don't have that problem, but there are quarantines. You may be able to go to a hospital without a quarantine if you need dialysis. Who knows? It gets complicated. If you die because you can't go to your hospital to get dialysis because of COVID, that's a COVID death. It wasn't a death from the actual virus. It doesn't count towards the virus's mortality figures, but it counts towards the overall death of this pandemic, and has to be considered as part of the pandemic because it was a casualty that would not have otherwise been lost. So as flu season starts, as schools open, yes, in this situation, what we appear to have is there was what I want to do here is this was a protest in Austin on Saturday. The protesters were protesting peacefully when a car pulled up and shots were fired. Reports appear to be different. What we do know is shots were fired out of that car, struck a protester 3 times, and he was killed. We are going to show that video now. You aren't going to see, this isn't extraordinarily graphic. You do not actually see the incident, but you will hear it.
Everybody back up!
So the reports are that car, and that is the video, that is from the phone of the person taking it. My sincerest hope that we have not doxed anyone. The reports are that the car actually started honking, tried to get through the traffic, may have actually either nearly hit or hit several people, and then what happened after that, apologies, what happened after that is up for some debate. One report is that the occupant of the car just started firing out into the crowd. Another report is that there was an armed protester who came up and tried to address the vehicle. What his intentions are, were, nobody knows. His mother has said that he, in fact, was not armed and that he was actually pushing his girlfriend, who was an invalid and in a wheelchair. According to at least one protester there, he was armed and approached the vehicle. Whether he had his weapon out, nobody knows. But the parts that seemed to be agreed upon was that car was moving erratically. It was moving through the protesters, may or may not have hit some protesters. And I actually do think we saw the car there. The car started honking a lot. This person either at this point approached the car, possibly with a weapon, or the car just came up to him. Whatever happened after that, whatever happened up to that point, we know then the car, shots came out from inside the car. At least that was, I think, more than 3 shots, but 3 shots struck the. Apologize. 3 shots struck one person, and he was killed. So we will let you know more of what happened. We have had a number of incidents of people just driving into crowds and or shooting into crowds. Starting with the very first incident, where in Detroit, a brown Ford Bronco, drove up into a crowd, started shooting into the crowd, shot and killed a 19-year-old boy. So The protests continue. They had been apparently de-escalating for some time and were apparently re-escalated when the news came out of Donald Trump's plan to, and at the time, secret or not told anyone, I don't know, but programmed to begin taking protesters off the streets with unidentified quasi-military units and detaining them. So we'll get into it. Anyways, I apologize again. I wanted to do that at the top. I'm going to go back to the COVID numbers. We will, after this, have our usual time in the Discord. I will be in the Discord for a few minutes. It's getting a little late, so I won't be able to stay there too long. But if you guys want to ask any questions of me, any questions about the show, anything, questions about anything we did tonight, any corrections, anything you want to talk about, come join us in the Discord. Mr. Tony Designs has graciously dropped that a few times in the live chat. I'm sure you'll get it at least once or twice more before the end of the show. So, and then actually just to cover, I guess, before I continue, there have been a couple comments worth mentioning here. Yes, I know a number of people. I've forgotten which state, but a state governor came out and said that he was going to reopen schools and it would be fine. And the reality is, not only will it not be fine, but I think you're going to have problems with the teachers' unions that are going to sue, teachers who will refuse to show up, and parents who will refuse to send their kids. So there's some. I'm trying to remember. I don't quite remember, but it was some administration official who just said, "Oh, it'll be fine, and we'll just open them up, and nothing could possibly go wrong." I don't know what planet that human being is on, but it is not the planet Earth, and it certainly isn't in the universe called reality. Because he's going to have a real legal problem on his hands, and that's assuming COVID doesn't ravage his state. And as I recall, looking at his numbers, it's not looking good. Is there any confirmation of Blackwater or other private contractors serving as secret police? Not to the best of my knowledge. Everybody has been Department of Homeland Security, in particular, mostly immigration officials. This is because they can be used and get around posse comitatus, which would block the President of the United States from using military officials. They're actually not Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol. And they are, here's the interesting thing. So they're not supposed to wear they're not supposed to wear military uniforms, and the Pentagon has been pushing back against military uniforms, genuine, not knockoffs, genuine military uniforms being worn by non-military officials in police actions. That's its own kind of, that's a problem for a lot of other reasons. So we've sort of covered that already in our episode. I think it was called a line crossed or a crossed line. That's scary stuff. We're going to end up probably revisiting it depending on what the courts decide and how much more we learn about what he's doing across the country. We'll stay on that, but right now he was planning on, the latest word, he was planning on deploying this program to as many as 60 cities, which to the best of my knowledge is not even how big right now the protests are. There's still protests, but I don't believe they're big in 60 cities. We're going to stay on it. So as we had said, so far, all of the evidence is that the White House is lying about their use of the military against unarmed civilians for no justifiable reason. I'm sorry, taking a picture with a Bible isn't a justifiable reason. It just isn't. And what's really terrifying is I'm now living in a country where the Republicans, who they're law and order, they believe in the Constitution, and they believe in individual rights and small government and keeping the tyranny of government at bay, don't even remember their own values. When the Republican Party can't stand behind its own values, whether I agree with those values or not, what's the point of why call yourself a Republican? Say you're in it for the money or whatever you're in it for, and at least be honest about it and go forward about it. But we had on Isandering to discuss that issue, and I think he made some very important points, not the least of which is when they talk about the Second Amendment being about keeping guns to fight off government overreach and the government coming to abduct you in the middle of the night. This is precisely what they were talking about. Somebody for whom at present we believe and have no evidence that there was and believe there was not any probable cause for the arrest, making it illegal. actually making it kidnapping. There was no probable cause. This is the definition of overreach, according to the Republicans' own definition. At this point, as I said, the testimony of the Major General, the highest ranking official there, actually the only one to testify so far, but the highest to weigh in on this, which concords with everybody who was there. It's expected that he's going to say that there was no violence. Also, we discussed Robert O'Brien, who got COVID-19. He is the National Security Advisor. Texas deaths has topped 5,000 deaths, with 1,000 of those in the last 6 days alone. We no longer have ICU or CDC data for Texas. We don't have CDC data for any other state. Some states are still giving hospital data. Texas has stopped. Apparently their governor doesn't appreciate the fact that just, I think 3 or 4 weeks after he said that the hospitals in Texas would be perfectly fine, there was not going to be a crisis and they could handle just about anything. They are completely overwhelmed, as predicted by every major medical institution on the planet, from South Korea to France to the UK to Germany to Canada. The only person who didn't see that coming in Texas was their governor. Arkansas State Senator Jason Rappert suggested in an article earlier this year about coronavirus that it was, quote, the biggest political hoax in history. He has refused to wear a mask and was seen just last week not wearing a mask while attending church service. He has been highly critical of policies to stop the spread and said of the Arkansas mandate to wear masks, quote, it's an overreach of executive power without consultation of members of the Arkansas legislature. I believe this mask mandate is ill-timed and not necessary. He was hospitalized this weekend for testing positive to COVID-19 and pneumonia. He is responding well to treatment, purportedly because his hospital system is not yet overwhelmed and because we do have access to some drugs that can treat it, so long as we control the number of people getting it at one time. He has fought efforts to do that, but fortunately got it early. Arkansas does, in fact, have, at present, 38,623 cases and 401 deaths. There are nearly 150,000 Americans dead now as a result of coronavirus. 3 hours ago, Trump tweeted the following. Quote, so disgusting to watch Twitter's so-called, quote, trending, where so many trends are about me and never a good one. They look for anything they can find, make it as bad as possible, and blow it up, trying to make it trend. Really ridiculous, illegal, and of course, very unfair. Thank you all for watching.